In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can become more personally powerful, self-actualized, and have better relationships by understanding the 4 masculine archetypes. Now, this is a complicated subject, and this video is the first of a multi-part series examining modern masculinity. Now, an archetype is essentially a blueprint for a specific type of character that often appears as a recurrent motif or subject in story and myth. The hero and the villain archetypes are ones that we see in almost every story, whether it's fiction, a TV show, or the news. But mother, father, boss, these are also examples. And today we're going to examine the mature masculine archetypes of the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover as defined by Jungian psychologist Robert Moore in his book of the same name. And if you're a man, you'll be able to apply this knowledge to your personal life to create more integrity, self-awareness, and personal power, like I mentioned before. But if you're not a man, understanding these archetypes can lead you to have better relationships with the men in your life. And you might also see some of these same characteristics at work inside of yourself. But first, a quick disclaimer. I've worked with hundreds of men over the last decade, from being an acupuncturist, a professional coach, and years of being involved in running men's groups and participating in men's groups. And in no way does what I'm going to discuss detract from or invalidate the experience of women or others who may belong to a non-dominant identity group. This is not a zero-sum game, and understanding the archetypes of the mature masculine should be a win-win for everybody. Now, masculinity kind of gets a bad rap these days, with terms like toxic masculinity floating around, combined with all the coverage of men abusing their power and their privilege. And as a man, one can start to feel pigeonholed into feeling guilty. And the result is that I see many men begin to question what masculinity even means. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But as a society and as we've evolved, what defines masculinity has changed. So whereas the Marlboro Man used to be the picture of masculinity, handsome, rugged, stoic, doesn't express emotion, only depends on himself, that now seems pretty outdated. But for men, it can feel like they're being assaulted with mixed messages. On one hand, men are still looked upon to be strong providers, showing up with strength, conviction, and competence, yet they're also expected to check their privilege at the door. Men are expected to be decisive and stand for truth and honor. But standing for truth can be tough in a postmodern world where all truth is considered relative. Men are expected to show up and use their privilege to speak up, and then in the next sentence, they're told to just shut up and just listen. And as a result, many men feel trapped and find it difficult to navigate and express themselves freely, while also confronting the real-life issues of power and privilege. And I've seen men deal with this in different ways. Some men just throw out anything other than what might be considered classic masculinity as a defense against these mixed messages, and they take solace in being super tough, adhering to traditional gender roles, owning guns, putting things into the good and the bad, the black and white, where nuance really just doesn't exist. And then on the other side, there's men who surrender their masculinity. They do it at work and in their personal lives. They're pushovers, and they secretly resent those who present as manly men. And these men, I think, are actually suffering more than the men who pursue the classic masculine route, because they're disowning important parts of their masculine energy. And the result of these competing energies is a modern male malaise, where men no longer know what their purpose is or what their importance is, and this manifests as a lack of confidence, depression, inability to express oneself, being stuck, and just feeling like you haven't actually been initiated into true manhood. And alternatively, this malaise can manifest itself as self-centeredness, narcissism, aggression, violence. Whatever the behavior, the root cause is the same, and it's men being disconnected from their mature masculine energies. And this is where the archetypes come into play. So if I say the word king to you, a particular image will come to mind, as will images if I say the word warrior or magician or lover. And these images are based on your own experience as well as the experience of all of humanity. And psychologist Carl Jung referred to this as the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious, according to Jung, consists of patterns of thought and behavior that have evolved over the entire scope of human history. And Jung argued that these archetypal patterns form the basis for all of human experience. Now, Jung created a list of archetypal figures which he said are based upon this collective unconscious. And these archetypes are further distilled by Robert Moore and mythologist Douglas Gillette into the 4 energetic aspects of king, warrior, magician, and lover. And according to Jung and Moore, whether you're a techie living in Silicon Valley or an Amazonian tribesman, the same primal behavioral foundations are at work inside of you. And the archetypes come to life through the expression of symbols, motifs, rituals, and story. And that's why, according to Jung, if you look at any society or culture, you'll find similarities in their most fundamental myths and stories. The Great Flood in the Bible or the death and resurrection of God are both tales that show up over and over in culture after culture. Now, I referred earlier to the idea of the mature masculine. The mature masculine is the fully developed man, as opposed to the man who's still stuck in what he called boy psychology. And boy psychology is the immature or unconscious masculine. So when people refer to toxic masculinity, what they're actually naming is unconscious boy psychology or shadow masculinity that can manifest itself as destructive behavior. And of course, there's no shortage today of examples of boy psychology. Love him or hate him, Donald Trump is a great example of a grown man acting much like an immature teenage boy, throwing around insults and accusations, denying responsibility, and not taking into account the impact of his actions. Harvey Weinstein and other men who've abused their power and privilege are acting out of their unconscious, immature shadow. And this isn't to excuse that behavior, it's just simply to better understand it. Now, one of the main problems in Western society, according to Moore, is that it suppresses the expression of full masculinity and instead encourages men to get more in touch with their softer side or their femininity. And while Moore would encourage men to get in touch with this feminine side, he would also say that in the modern world, this oftentimes comes at the expense of man's true primal masculine drive, which results in destructive behavior both to that man and to society as a whole. You can start to examine conflicting societal values to begin to see how this operates. We have the values of brash youth over mature wisdom, of domination over stewardship, and of upstart rebelliousness versus cooperation. We see this in the worship of youth and hustle culture as well. Now, the true goal of a man is to live in conscious connection with and balance the energy of each archetype, to live a life of full integration and expression where a man can find his own inner peace, give and receive love fearlessly, and protect what is valuable not just to him, but also to the tribe. Because if a man is not in conscious connection with a particular archetype, then he is destined to be ruled by the immature and bipolar shadow of that archetype. So the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover, in their mature fullness, display very different characteristics than the immature boyhood version of the same. The king, in his fullness, is centered, he's decisive, he has integrity, he provides order, and realizes that the world will outlive him. And instead of taking credit himself, he blesses and bestows honor upon others. The immature shadow king is either a tyrant or a weakling, and the tyrant, instead of blessing others, insults, belittles, and seeks to elevate himself while tearing others down. He has a scarcity mentality, and he believes that life is essentially a zero-sum game. Now, the weakling is incredibly insecure and sees others as a threat to his own power, and therefore he lives in paranoia and can become cruel and insensitive. Now, the warrior in his fullness is strong, principled, and protects that which is valuable to him and his community. He's skillful, he's loyal, he's even aggressive when necessary, but also disciplined, and goes to great lengths to accomplish his goal, even to the point of sacrificing himself if it's needed. Now, the shadow warrior pendulums between sadism and masochism. The sadist is cruel and looks upon any weakness or vulnerability in others as something to be dominated and exploited, while the masochist will refuse to set and create their own boundaries, will be a pushover, and blame others for his failures. Now, there's a part of him that secretly enjoys the pain he's inflicting on himself. The magician, in his fullness, is a sage, a wise man, a mentor, and a master of everything from spirituality to mathematics. He's the shaman who the tribe relies on to heal and provide a vision for the future. Now, the immature shadows of the magician are the manipulator and the innocent. The manipulator uses his secret powers to take advantage of others, while the innocent collects his secret knowledge and he uses it, but doesn't take responsibility for his impact when he uses it unskillfully. And finally, the lover in his fullness is connected deeply to passion and empathy and sensuality and all that is pleasurable and beautiful in the world. He lives unapologetically in his love and expression of his desire. And the shadow side is the addicted lover and the impotent lover. Now, the addicted lover is eternally restless, looking for the rush in everyone and everything, constantly looking outside himself for satisfaction, and bounces from lover to lover and material possession to material possession, always hoping that whatever the next one is will get him what he's looking for. And on the other side is the impotent lover who sits in depression and he's lost touch with his passions. He has no libido for life, and romance and sex and passion all suffer. And this man oftentimes tries to live in too controlled and safe manner and isn't in touch with his inner wild man. So those are the 4 archetypes of the mature masculine. And to begin to understand how they operate in your own life, start to pay attention to what energy is at work when you do certain things. And I guarantee that if something feels off for you, there's almost certainly an energetic imbalance between one of these archetypes. I also recommend picking up Morin Douglas's book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And in the next video and part 2 of the series, we'll discuss the deeper structure of each archetype, as well as the developmental framework that will allow you to see and understand where you are in your own journey to the mature masculine and where your own archetypal energy needs to be balanced.